That was really tough for him. Did you see the video?
No,
They just left him on the ground, and the trainers went and like picked up the ball, and he's just laying there. No one came to him.
No, that's great. All right, once again, you know the drill. We've had 3 days in, and now we conclude the first weekend of what's been an absolutely fantastic March Madness, the round of 32. We're going to get to the Sweet 16. We will anoint the final 8 teams that we'll be doing. We'll do it right now. We've got 8 games to get to here at Awesemo. Ben Rasa, Matt Gajewski here to break it all down. Matt, we've done this show 3 days in a row. We're getting into a groove now. You mentioned to me that you think that these games might be the most competitive of the tournament so far. It seems like you're kind of excited about what we got on tap today.
Yeah, I'm hopeful we get some of the best real life basketball of the tournament so far. I know people throwing half court passes off the backboard, things like that, but that was absurd. But we get really close spreads with Purdue, Texas. Those are 2 really good teams, but good clash of styles there. I think everybody's excited for the Houston, Illinois game, and that actually kicks us off today. But a lot of really good basketball left to be had.
So we're going to dive in. We're going to talk about prize picks. We're going to do all the shenanigans, but I have to ask you about some of the things that we saw yesterday. And I have to start with, I not that anyone cares what I was doing, but I got myself a lovely Italian combo. I was big on UNC. I'm loving life. I'm eating. I'm not paying attention. And I see that Brady Manick has been ejected. And I didn't really think anything of it. And then before I could blink, I saw Leaky Black throwing alley-oops to himself off the backboard for no reason. It was one of the wildest games I've ever seen. Did you watch that game? And what were your thoughts about Baylor UNC?
Yeah, so I caught the second half. I was away for the first half. So I actually missed the ejection, but saw kind of the aftermath. So I don't think that referee crew should be let on the floor again the rest of the tournament. They just had game-altering calls. And you just can't have that in this sport. And luckily for North Carolina, despite the kind of controversial ejection, they were able to weather that storm. Baylor coming back in the second half on that crazy run they had. that was just a great game overall. But man, you hate to see the games decided so much by fouls and referees. And that's just the climate we have in college basketball right now. So, and unfortunate, but luckily it led us to a good game at least.
It was, I don't want to be that guy, but there was a string where every call was wrong. It was just like bad foul calls. They called the 5-second count. It may have been, they may have got to 3 seconds. They called the backcourt violation, just madness. That started our day. And then I want to fast forward all the way to the end. What did you think of Gonzaga? Once again, you could say one of two things. One, they've been tested and they've responded. Two, they looked incredibly soft at times. I'll be honest, as a Zags backer, they were getting whipped inside. Timmy stepped up big. What were your thoughts on Memphis Gonzaga last night?
I fell asleep during the second half, so I saw the good part for Memphis, but your
Timmy
thoughts,
went nuts.
Yeah, your thoughts are almost exactly what I think about Gonzaga every single year. They don't play anybody good the entire year. I mean, their quad one wins are basically against their own conference, Santa Clara, San Francisco, and St. Mary's. And when they play decent competition outside of their conference, it's largely mixed results. They lost to Bama. They lost to Duke this year. I mean, those are good losses, but I mean, you're losing to Bama. That's not great. With them in the tournament, they struggle against teams that'll pressure them. We saw that last year in the final against Baylor. And I think they continue to see struggles. Memphis is a really long athletic team. They play fast. They play good defense. I'm not surprised they ended up giving them trouble in that game. So Gonzaga is a team I've been looking to fade all year, been betting against them in the tournament so far. With some luck, the Georgia State line was very lucky to have covered. But overall, betting against Gonzaga has been pretty solid.
Yeah, I mean, they, like I said, they survive in advance, but it was a shaky game, entertaining nonetheless. So we've got that. We turned the page. We're, of course, going to be talking about those teams next week, and they will meet some of what we're going to talk about here, potentially down the road or in the near future. But let's get into it. We've got 8 games, and we're going to start, as we always do, with our friends at PrizePicks, powering the show. You guys have heard this day after day, but if you have not, if you're hopping in for the first time, or you just haven't done it yet, head over to prizepicks.com. Their daily prop-based contest. There is money to be made. You're going to be picking 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 guys over under a projected category, whether it's points, rebounds, assists, 3-pointers, things like that. You get up to 10 extra entry fee. And we have a deal for you. First match deposit bonus of up to $100 with that promo code Awesemo. You can download in the App Store or play on prizepicks.com. And again, you're going to get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum when you do this. When you sign up using that link in the description of this video, you make that deposit. We've got the player props, Matt. You run the usage, the projections, all those things are great for PrizePicks. I want to ask for a couple of picks right off the top. I always like to go to these alpha guys in the front court. Baycott yesterday was one we talked about. We got to talk about Kofi. It's the first game. We're going to get to him in the game, but what do you make of his rebounding prop at 10.5?
I'm a little surprised. PrizePicks was pretty soft with their offerings today. They only have a couple games. Maybe they'll add them later in the day, but just right off the bat, there wasn't as much I liked because they just really limited their selection. Kofi's always going to project above his rebounding props. It kind of comes down to matchups here. The total is actually a little healthier than I thought, and Kofi projects for 11.7 rebounds on our back end. So that's a pretty solid margin there if you want to go over. Houston doesn't have a ton of size. They're not the biggest team in the country. So Kofi certainly is a good matchup. The worries with him are always going to be fouls. And Houston does have a better interior presence than Chattanooga. So I don't think it's just going to be Kofi drawing fouls left and right every single time he's on the floor like we saw in their last game.
No doubt. I mean, Chattanooga was running extremely thin in that front court. We'll get to this game in full because I do have some thoughts on that total. I want to ask you about one more big, though, in the Villanova Ohio State game with EJ Liddell. 8.5 rebounds is his over-under. Could be a pretty methodical game, but is that one that you also lean over, or is that one maybe you take a different direction?
He projects right at 8.4 for us. So not a ton of value, but if you want to get into stylistics and matchups, Ohio State's best matchup is in the front court against Villanova. They're just not the biggest team overall. They're outside the top 200 in rebounding. EJ Liddell is going to play every single minute. So while there are some players that have slightly better projections, if you were to defer just to matchups in this instance, I think this would be the place to do it. Actually, kind of like in the same vein, I kind of like Kyle Young.
And his rebounds at 4.5?
Yeah, he's a player that's kind of seen, I don't want to say a limited role, but just not the most consistent, whether it's been injury Ohio State's kind of messed with their rotation throughout the year a little bit, but he returned from injury in their last game, played over 30 minutes in a game that mattered a ton to them. Obviously, this is equally as impactful. So I think Kyle Young's going to be on the floor for 30, 35 minutes. 4.5 is really low for him.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, again, this is why we do this. Some of these guys that I don't want to say they're secondary options, but at the same time, maybe not the premier alpha on their team. We can find some of those, and we're going to talk about that.
He projects for 7.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm talking about. I'm going to put that on the Ben Rasa card. Okay, good job. We've identified. We're going to talk about these throughout the show. If someone, chat, if you got guys you want, just drop it in there. Here we go. You ready? 8 up, 8 down.
Yeah, we're starting with the best game, aren't we?
We certainly are. Houston, -4.5, playing Illinois. 134.5 total. To me, that's too much. I think this is going to be a pretty grinded out game. Houston went absolutely banana land against UAB. They were raining threes. It was just dumb. That guy, Jelly Walker, who was supposed to be unstoppable, was very stoppable. I don't draw much of that at all. Illinois will be ready for them. What are your thoughts on what I think is the best game of the 8?
I think so too. From a betting perspective, it's really interesting. Like, I want to back Houston in this game, but I think the spread has gone a little too far in favor of Houston. They're a team that doesn't play the best competition. Illinois is the team I thought was a little underrated coming into the tournament, largely due to injury. They've had injuries to multiple players from time to time throughout the year, highlighted by Curbelo. He's the player that missed nearly 2 months of action with the concussion, but Kofi was suspended for a period of time. Grandison was out. Even in their last game, Trent Frazier looked like he got punched in the face. I was watching the games with my brother. It's like, what the heck happened to Trent Frazier? Apparently he had pink eye and he was having trouble seeing. I don't know how much of that is an excuse for the game they played against Chattanooga, but I mean, this is an underrated team. If I were betting it, it'd probably be Illinois, but I don't say that with any confidence. For DFS, you have one of the best plays on the slate in Andre Curbelo. He's just way too cheap for the role he's playing right now. Because of that 2-month absence, they really took a slow approach to bringing him back. They kind of decided they were going to take like a 2-month gradual ramp up period, which I don't know. I wish they would have played him earlier. I think it would have helped him in certain games, but Curbelo's finally back to kind of the role we expected him to be. He went from 22 minutes to 28 minutes to 30 minutes in their most recent game against Chattanooga. So he's going to be a guy that has great usage, is above 20%. He's involved everywhere, good shot rate, good assist rate. Because we don't have a lot of value on the slate, there's no Frankie Collins or Faisal for Creighton. You're going to have to play a guy like Curbelo, I think. Outside of him, Coleman Hawkins is pretty decent, 37, 32, 32 minutes. I think those minutes are a little riskier because Jacob Grandison has been injured. He returned in their most recent game, but still only 9 minutes. It kind of makes Hawkins a little more fragile than Curbelo. Kofi is always going to be in play. Like you mentioned, the game environment is not quite as good as some others on the slate. So you're going to have to make decisions between a guy like Walker Kessler, Banchero, and Kofi. So he's kind of on the outside looking in for me when it comes to opportunity cost, but still a really good play. On the Houston side, they play 5 guys. Unfortunately, their team total is still below 70, and some of the players are in a little bit more difficult matchups, but a guy in Fabian White, he's one of their bigs. He still shouldn't be against Kofi that often. Really good usage rate for him. Also was battling the back injury in the conference tournament. He should be above 30 minutes, no problem here. Kyler has been playing out of his mind. He's above 20% in all 3 major statistical categories. And then you can always get to Carlton, Taze as GPP options.
What about Sheed?
He's okay too. He's going to be the main ball handler. I think because they play such a tight distribution of minutes, they're all tournament options, but Fabian's the cheapest of the guys that see consistent minutes. So he's the one I would try to target.
You kind of alluded to this, in terms of the Kofi effect. Do you worry about targeting Houston bigs because of the chance that they're sitting on the bench with 2 fouls pretty quickly? Or is that something that you say, in tournaments, you're incurring risk no matter what, you don't really care about who they may be guarding on the other end?
Yeah, I was talking to Steve and Gavin about this in the chat, and they're a little more into the matchups than me, and they believe that it's going to mainly be like Josh Carlton taking on Kofi. And if there's foul trouble, it's probably going to be a committee approach with Reggie Chaney and some of these guys coming off the bench, with Fabian mainly playing the 4. So with Fabian, it doesn't appear to be a huge risk, but I mean, Kofi draws a ton of fouls. If 2 of those guys get in foul trouble, maybe it's just a necessity that Houston has to play with. But at first glance, it doesn't appear Fabian should be on Kofi too much.
In terms of, every day we've done the show 3 days in a row, and I've asked the same question, and it seems like there's always a couple of studs in the front court that we may be looking to pay up. Are you building around Kofi in cash, or is he just kind of a luxury that in a portfolio you want exposure to?
It's the latter. In cash, there's a little risk with the tough Houston defense, the low game total. And then Kofi is just, I mean, he's a matchup nightmare because of his size, but the guy is very, very rebound dependent. He's not a good shooter at all. If he faces a more difficult matchup and he's still drawing fouls, he's not live from the free throw line. So he's just a little bit risky here, in my opinion, for cash. I still think he's fine in tournaments.
Anything else you mentioned? You lean Illinois. I also lean Illinois in the game. I have not got Houston right all year. I think it's going to be lower scoring. Is anything on your betting card from this game?
No, I don't think I'm going to touch it either. I think you just sit back, enjoy it in real life.
Whoever wins, Arizona will have their hands full. These are good teams. There's no doubt about it. And if they had Sasser and Mack, Houston would not be a 5 seed. That is for sure. All right, let's move on then. We've got Ohio State and Villanova, 5.5-point favorites for the Wildcats, 132.5-point total. So again, very, very similar in terms of what we're looking at for maybe stylistic and pace, but different in some regards. Ohio State played Loyola, and Loyola couldn't do much of anything. Liddell is the same ballpark price, nearly identical as Kofi. So what are we looking at there? Is he the same philosophy, or are you looking to target him maybe heavier?
Yeah, these Big Ten bigs are just in really difficult game environments. For Liddell, it's a lot of the same. Villanova just plays so slow that he kind of that pace takes away a lot of the upside from the game environment overall. Like, you're probably not going to see AJ Liddell score 20, 25 real life points in a game like this. It's always possible, but the total in the game is just so low at 132. And we know Nova's pace is really going to depress teams. I think the total is actually a little higher than I thought it would be. And it kind of comes down to each team's offensive strength exploits the weakness of their opponent. Ohio State's going to play through Liddell and Kyle Young. Villanova is not a large team. They definitely aren't a team that plays through their bigs. When you look at their rebounding and height, they're definitely worse than Ohio State. They're 164th in rebounding, 265th in effective height. Ohio State, not the biggest team themselves, but they definitely hold the edge there. Meanwhile, Villanova on offense, they're a team that shoots a lot of threes and they shoot them well. 34th in three-point attempts per game, 58th in three-point percentage. You look at Ohio State's defense on the perimeter, they're definitely weak there. 204th in perimeter defense. I think that's why the total's a little high, but with that said, it still leaves a lot to be desired. On Ohio State, instead of getting to Liddell, I think I would rather exploit the front court matchup with Kyle Young, who's 5K, still priced as if he's injured, and he played 35 minutes in their last game. Rates for him are a little depressed this year because of injury, but I think in a game where he sees 35 minutes, even if he just plays to his 13.5% usage rate, that's something we want to get to. Branham is a great GPP play. He just doesn't have quite the usage as Liddell. And I think that's about it for Ohio State. Did you see anything else?
Not really. To be honest, they're just, I think everyone is kind of saying the same way, and I haven't bet this, so I can't say I'm too confident, but everyone, even in chat, like, oh, is this game going to reach 100 points? Doesn't it feel like this could be really ugly? I know the recency bias of what we saw with Loyola, but Villanova plays so methodical. Ohio State, not exactly prolific offensively. And if Nova stays out of foul trouble, and they're a pretty good team at not fouling, that's one of the interesting things about Liddell. A lot of his production comes at the line. He had 10 free throw attempts against Loyola, going back to the Big Ten tournament. He had 13 against Penn State. He converts a lot of them. How many real life points is he going to score if he only has, 5-6 attempts from the line? That's a great point.
You bring up the total, which is something I've wrestled with a lot since this matchup was announced. The line is around 132. KenPom has it at 137. My model had it at 136. So, everything points towards the over mathematically. It's just looking at Villanova and knowing how they play. They average 66.5 possessions per game. That is way below average. And Ohio State's not much better at 67.4. So if this game goes over, it has to be through efficiency. I bet the over just out of principle. Anytime there's like a 4 or 5 point discrepancy between KenPom and the total and my model and the total, I have to bet it. But it's definitely one where I'm siding with the math. I don't know.
Yeah, it's an uncomfortable. I have not bet it. I'm not going to. But I get it there. I assume it's pretty clearly that you're not looking to stack up, like anything on the Ohio State, maybe like a max of 1 on some teams.
Yeah, I think at the very most, you play Liddell and Kyle Young together, but I think that's risky. We didn't talk Nova very much. They're just overpriced for this game environment. And we see that a lot with Nova. They're all going to give you good floors, but in tournaments, what's the ceiling like? And it's a slate where we don't have good value plays. Like Curbelo is the best value play, and he's 4.8K. He's much more expensive than the Creighton guys yesterday. So he's kind of, these Villanova guys are just sort of casualties because of pricing structure. I don't think they're good plays really anywhere.
In terms of a guy like Gajewski, you know, he's been there forever. He does what he does. He shoots when he needs to. PrizePicks got him over 2.5 3-pointers. Is that something that you look to? I mean, when it's go time, he is very assertive. At other times, more passive. Is that a category that you're willing to take a stand on? Let
me look at it on the back end. It's something that we definitely project, but I don't have it referenced right in front of me. What was the line you said, Ben?
2.5 3-pointers for Gajewski.
Yeah, he's at 3 flat, 2.99.
Okay. So yeah, that's where I would side as well. I mean, like any of these guys, it's a volume situation. Villanova takes an insane amount of threes. And when he wants to, he took 9 against Delaware, 4 for 9. That's certainly going to get it done. This should be much more competitive. You mentioned that everyone's overpriced. Is there really, like, you know, Nova was missing kind of a backup guard. Their freshman was ruled out. Is anything a factor in terms of the rotation, or it's just price really limiting these ceilings?
It's entirely price. I mean, a lot of stuff points to the over matchups, the math behind it, and the projections. So for tournaments, I think you could get there with Moore and Gillespie. You know, they're cheaper than some of the other studs like Banchero and Kessler, some of the elite studs, but still with that build, you're probably leaving out some of the elite plays on the slate. And I think that's risky. I usually ending up with one 7K guy in my lineup. So if those players are usually like a Timmy Allen or Fabian White. So if you want to make the 1-for-1 pivot, I think you could, just a little thinner than normal. It'd have to be a large tournament.
There you go. Last question. Side in the game. I have nothing. I have no idea what's going to happen.
I lean Ohio State, but not one I would bet. Ohio State just I thought I was going to fade the Big Ten heavy in the tournament, but they drew such easy matchups. Like Michigan against Colorado State was the perfect matchup for Michigan. Wisconsin getting home games and now facing Iowa State in the second round. Like, what does Wisconsin really have to do to lose that game? And in this instance, Ohio State's finally getting healthier. They have tougher matchups, but they're just underrated, having missed players nearly the entire season. So they're definitely a stronger team now. I don't know if it's enough to bet, but this Ohio State team is live.
Yeah, I definitely think they're live too. And I would love to see them win, actually. We'll see. 5.5 feels about right to me, not on the card. And yeah, as I always say, if you're looking for more betting picks, of course, hop in our premium Discord. The link is in the description. Use that promo code. Let me see those picks. You get some discounts. Me, Matt, and the entire team, Alex Baker, Steve Buzzard, everyone does a great job dropping picks, not just on college basketball, but all the sports, the little tennis action. You know how it goes on these crazy days. All right. Blue blood time. Michigan State and Duke. Duke is a 6.5-point favorite, 145.5-point total. So now it's only 3 games so far, but we're 10 points north of what we just talked about in the previous 2. I mentioned Paulo, got Williams, got more. Duke has got some premium guys. They've got 3 guys north of 8K on this slate. Can you allocate 2 of them in lineups? Is it always you want at least one of them? How do you go about Duke on this slate?
I think you're probably avoiding 2 just because we do have 8 games and we have other studs that are very good. But if you play any of the 3, I think you're fine. The one I like the least is Wendell. It's just Paulo has taken on a lot more usage down the stretch for this team. So that's come at the expense of Wendell. Mark plays a different role. Big Mark Williams is going to play the 5. Minutes are extremely volatile. Even in the last 3 games, we've seen 32, 19, and 31. But when he plays 30 minutes, the guy is a straight up walking double-double. Michigan State, not good on defense, not great in the interior, despite some of the size they have. I mean, the guys they play in the interior, just a bunch of big dummies, and they can't defend, especially like Hauser when he's in there. There's a complete turnstile on defense. So an amazing matchup for the Duke interior. I like Paulo the best, and it's a little bit different than Mark. He's not as rebound dependent. Paulo has great rates across the board, 21.5% shot rate, 27% rebound rate, 23% assist rate last 3. We saw him play amazing in their first tournament game. He's going to play every single minute during competitive spots. So he immediately stands out as a stud. And I'm honestly having a lot of trouble deciding between him and like a Walker Kessler. So Paulo, I think, is fringe cash viable. Outside of that, you have Griffin. I think he's a great tournament play. He's much cheaper. Just the rates are going to suffer with him. He does have a 20% shot rate last three, which is telling. And then they kind of had a change of roles in the front, or excuse me, in the backcourt. They benched Trevor Keels and they started Jeremy Roach. And Jeremy Roach played 35 minutes. Again, with so much usage coming through Wendell, Paulo, and Mark, Roach is never going to have elite rates. But on a slate where we're starved for value, 4.9, Jeremy Roach seems like a necessity. So he's somebody I think you could get to just based on what he does to the rest of your lineup. He's that access point that allows you to play multiple studs.
Yeah, you mentioned the 35 minutes against Cal State Fullerton. Obviously can distribute the ball. Paulo, so I'm looking at his PrizePicks props. 3.5 assists over under. We've got 7.5 boards over under. And then for points, we've got 17.5. So you kind of just mentioned how he can really contribute across the board. He's the same. So far we've got Kofi, Liddell, and Paulo. Is Paulo ahead of them right now in kind of how you're prioritizing?
Yep. He takes advantage of similar advantages, matchup advantages. He's in a better game environment. And he does more. He's more active in the periphery than those guys. I mean, they're great rebounders, but Paulo's assist rate is very high as well.
Anything else on the Duke side? They're not a team, at least in my opinion, that really has anyone out of, it's not a rotation where there's guys that could step up and we kind of know what we know. You've got the bigs. You mentioned Roach coming in and whatnot. I don't see anything else, do you?
No, they play 6 guys, which is great for DFS as well. Michigan State, now, they're going to play 10 guys. That's the exact opposite. The rotation's extremely volatile. The team is bad overall. It's kind of a miracle they're here. We reference shot quality a lot. They should have lost their first round game to Davidson. That game was basically a pick 'em or around there, depending on where you got it. So unless you had Davidson early, you probably lost your bets. And that's unfortunate because they should have won that game. Now for DFS, I think a lot of people are going to try to play Hauser. He played 34 minutes in their last game. He's horrific on defense. So he's probably not going to play 34 minutes again. I would guess he's right back to the 20 he'd been playing all year. Their front court is kind of a turnstile as well. Max Christie was the only player that had been getting consistent minutes, but they're declining. He's now gone from 32 to 29 to 27. He's just being outplayed by other guys. And even when Christie's on the floor, his best quality is his cardio. He actually doesn't stuff the stats in any category. So 4,300, even though we're starved for value, I think I would rather just pay the 500 for Curbelo than get to Christie.
Can you go even lower, like someone like Marble, who's really paying pedestrian minutes at that?
If Marble plays more than 10 minutes in this game, I would be shocked. He fouled out in 9 minutes in their second most recent game, and now he's going up against Williams, Banchero, and Moore.
Is there a situation, the one thing I wanted to ask you about Michigan State is Tyson Walker, who was dealing with injury, 25 minutes against Davidson. Do you think that he could push for more here? Or is that just kind of the role that we need to get used to seeing him in going forward?
He's played above 30 minutes on occasion. It's just at the whims of their head coach. Like their head coach comes into these games without a plan. And it's kind of a miracle that they've gone this far. I didn't bet the game, but I'm seriously considering Duke. Duke might just slaughter this Michigan State team. They're bad, man. They're a bad team.
They are a bad team. I'm not going to argue with that. I think they make a pretty good part. I got myself in trouble with this yesterday, but I don't really see Duke losing this game too often, even though you would be probably pairing them with someone. Michigan State, the turnovers, I cannot get over how, particularly against the press, they've just been awful at dealing with that. They nearly blew it against David. Time and time again, we have seen it, but is this a game just because of the total that we can look to taking a couple Spartans, taking Roach, taking Paulo, and creating some sort of game stack?
Game stack is a little harder for me to see because even if Michigan State keeps it competitive, the rotation is so wide that it's just going to be very difficult for you to nail the guy out of the 10 that hits the ceiling. And maybe there is one that gets there. There's a chance none of them do, but in the event that one of them gets there, how do you guess? Like in their most recent game, Hauser hadn't played more than 22 minutes in 20 straight games, and he pops up for a random 34. That's how volatile it is. But you speak to the turnovers. Duke's amazing at forcing them to. This is going to be one of the toughest matchups the Spartans have played all year.
So last thing, we had a question about value cash on FanDuel. Is Roach possibly filling that void?
On FanDuel, I can't remember if I played him. Let me pull it up. I actually played FanDuel yesterday. It went very well. So playing again today. I typically don't play a lot over there. But FanDuel, like similar to yesterday, it's just a lot more loose in terms of value. No, I don't have him there. You don't need to, I think. Like Kyle Young's 4,400 on FanDuel. Kevin McCullough's 4,700. I mean, even Johnny Davis is 68. We'll talk about him later, but man, he's not even 7K on FanDuel. You just don't need to play him.
There you go.
Benedict Mathurin is 66. Like, what is FanDuel doing? You can play whoever you want.
Crazy soft. Last question. We had a PrizePicks question on Max Christie. His points is over under 7.5. Is that one that you might be willing to take a stand on?
Christie projects for, let's see here, 9.8. Yeah, I think you can. He's volatile, but you can definitely do that.
Yeah, healthy game.
Solid value based on the projections.
Yeah, and good pace. They should be losing. I think this could come in around the total. So that's a good find by our chat. Good looking out. All right, here we go. Moving on. You boys. Iowa State mercifully won a game that at one point LSU had 6 players on the court and got a technical foul. That summed up what we saw in that game. I haven't seen that maybe ever. They play Wisconsin, who I didn't see in the first round. I fell asleep. Seems like they weathered the storm against Colgate. They're 4.5 point favorite in Milwaukee, 125.5. Let's start with Iowa State, who I didn't even think they deserved to be here, but they are here. Brockington leads it off here. We've had questions about him. Let's get to him and Hunter. What are you doing with them?
Much better plays on FanDuel. Brockington's actually a pretty good value over there because he's egregiously priced. So like half the slate is. I would still be a little wary of playing him there just because of the low total in this game. It's at 126. Both these teams are slow. The strength of both teams is on defense, mainly Iowa State. They have a drastic difference in efficiency between offense and defense, but we saw them just stifle LSU, who has some NBA players. So that's telling of how good they actually are. On offense, Brockington is the do-it-all player for this team. He has a 27.5% shot rate, 15.5% rebound rate, and 15% assist rate. His usage rate in total is up at 19%, but that's maximized by him playing 38 plus minutes in competitive games. Wisconsin's going to give him a game, but I think just the rates are high enough to target on FanDuel. On Wisconsin, Johnny Davis is hurt. Don't listen to the DraftKings app. He's not questionable. He's going to play in the game. He played 37 minutes in the last game. What you really should question, though, is if he's actually healthy enough to contribute at the ceiling he'd been displaying earlier in the year. And I have significant questions there. So at 8,800, he's off my board on DraftKings, but on FanDuel, he's 6,800, which is just tempting you to at least consider him even with the injury, because that is so cheap. If he's at even 75%, he's going to be a good play on FanDuel.
Yeah, I mean, from what we saw, it's impacting probably more the efficiency than the usage. He took 20 shots and 10 3-pointers against Colgate.
This Wisconsin team is an NIT team without him, so he's going to be out there.
Oh, he's going to be out there. Yeah, ankle or no ankle, he is playing. Let's go to PrizePicks for a second. Johnny Davis, 17.5 points. Brockington, 15.5 points. Too high, too low, about right.
Davis, he projects for more, but you're weary of the injury. Brockington's at 19 points. Brockington's going to shoot a million times.
Yeah, I like this Brockington one. Chap brought that up. I don't bet a ton of player props in college, rarely, but that's one I may look to. So good find there. What else? Let's go back to Iowa State here. We mentioned Brockington. You mentioned Hunter. Is there anything else to mention? Because after that, Kunk, Grill, these guys, there's a couple $1,000 difference in price, but obviously they don't contribute nearly as much.
Gabe Kalscheur is a very risky shot dependent value play. You'd play him maybe because of price, but this is a game where you're playing max one player. So I've X'd the game out except for FanDuel.
Oh, on both sides.
DraftKings Johnny Davis is just priced efficiently if he's healthy, and we don't have that guarantee. So if you're deciding between him, Kessler, Banchero, outside of the largest tournaments, it's a pretty easy decision to get to those players instead of Davis. Brad Davison's too expensive for his role. Wall is too expensive for his role. Hepburn's too expensive for his role. Same thing for everybody on Iowa State except Brockington.
No Chucky for you. Wow. Tough scene.
Chucky, good real life player, good wind sprinter, bad rates, low usage. And people misunderstand me with Chucky Hepburn. I do not think he's a bad player. I think he's rightfully underutilized in an offense that has an NBA lottery pick. Chucky Hepburn should not be the player taking all the shots. He should be deferring to Davis. So I think people just misconstrue my opinion on Chucky Hepburn. I think he's fine. He's playing his role, and he shouldn't be taking on more.
Yeah, Fran McCaffrey would disagree with his freaking offense. But
he's not related to Fran, so he wouldn't play.
That's true, but I think Keegan feels the pain of Johnny Davis at times. All right, well, let's see here. I personally, in the game, as scary as it is, I think Wisconsin's going to clamp down. I don't trust Iowa State. I think it could be ugly, but I would lean to the Badgers. They're at home, basically. You have a lean in the game? I haven't.
I'm trying to fade both these teams long term, and they're both so volatile, man. Like, no, I don't think I can bet it.
If you combined these teams, do you think they could beat Auburn?
No, I think Auburn catches a body in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So naturally, when we're talking about Iowa State and Miami next week, we'll edit this part of the video out. All right, we've got 4 up. We've got 4 more to go. A little halftime appetizer. I will say, if you guys are hopping in for the first time and you want to support us, you're saying you're enjoying what you're seeing, easiest way to do it, just hit the like button. We got a lot of people in here. We appreciate the audience has been building throughout the 4 days from Thursday to Friday, Saturday to Sunday. If you want all the tools, all the data, you can go to the description. You can sign up for our March Madness package. It is still available. You get those projections. You can use them for anything. Use them for PrizePicks. Use them for betting. Use them for DFS, obviously on the traditional sites. If you're more of a betting centric, we've got the betting picks. We really got everything that you need there. And if you want more shows, more content, you can subscribe to this channel and you can head over to OddShopper YouTube, where you got Matt's best bets of the day video dropping every day. My PGA, Lofty's NBA, just the whole team doing a great job over there. On PrizePicks, I know we've talked about a lot of these guys. I like to ask you these questions because, you have your projections and whatnot, and there's different categories. Do you ever use the fantasy score and just actually go to the fantasy score over under?
Yeah, it's correlated obviously with all of the actual statistics, but I think fantasy score is a way you can take advantage of maybe somebody has a mispriced prop in one statistical category, and that could be something that really makes up for the difference in some of the other ones. Usually I will just bet them both, but I think you can. As we're speaking right now, I said at the beginning of the show, probably prematurely, that they didn't have a large offering today. They are releasing more and more and more as we're live on air. So make sure to check these out, especially as they're coming out. But one that stood out to me is Walker Kessler. He looks like he's a bit under projected everywhere. Points 11.5 stands out to me. He's already averaging more than that on the year. He projects for 12.5, and that doesn't take in his range of outcomes. They're playing Miami, who's very weak in their front court. Walker Kessler has a massive, massive size advantage over anyone they're going to put on the floor. So I think rebounds, points, probably fantasy total as well. I haven't taken a look at that, but Walker looks a bit under projected on their end.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about those 8.5 boards as well for him.
He might have 15.
That would be useful if you back it. Hopefully he knocked out a tooth of his buddy on the team last week, caught an elbow. But Walker Kessler is going to be someone we're going to talk about in all formats today. All right, here we go. On to the second half. This hurts, but it is Notre Dame. They have made it through the first round and the play-in game. Now they get Texas Tech, though. Texas Tech 8-point favorite, 131.5 point total. Notre Dame caught some, let's be real, they played well, but they caught some good breaks. Alabama's best player got injured immediately, and then Cormac Ryan from the clouds hit 7 3-pointers. He had 29 real-life points. He just went absolutely nuclear. So what do we do with this team, given that they are now facing Texas Tech's defense?
Texas Tech has the number 2 defense in the country. The total in this game is low. I like the under in the game as well. Both these teams play very slow. With Notre Dame, the thesis behind them all year is they play a condensed rotation. It's expanded to like 6.5 guys, depending on how many minutes Trey Wirtz gets. So you don't have the same consistency here, and they don't have a solid usage leader. Blake Wesley actually has the most usage on the year, but his minutes have been reduced lately. That's kind of come at the expense of Paul Atkinson, who was kind of like a 25-minute per game guy earlier in the year, but he's been up above 30 in each of the last two. I don't know if that continues. So it's just kind of a volatile situation. Cormac Ryan had the game of his career. He has a 12% usage rate. I wouldn't play him. Prentice Hub plays a lot of minutes, and he's the cheapest of the dudes that play a lot. I mean, for large tournaments, maybe you can get to him, but Notre Dame's a team I X'd out. Even with all the positives, they're still playing the number 2 defense in the country. And that defense matches up very well against this Notre Dame team. So I think they kind of put the clamps down here.
It's definitely a bad matchup. There's no doubt. A guy like Prentice Hub he shot so poorly. He's 4 for 20 in the tournament. He fills it up with the rebounds and the peripherals a little bit, and the price is reasonable. It's just the matchup, though. You mentioned how strong Texas Tech's defense is, 131.5 total, but it's an 8-point spread. So obviously the implied totals, this is a tough scene for Notre Dame. Is there really anything else, that we can talk about, or is it just that the matchup blankets them so much that there's not much we can do here?
Yeah, it's exactly that. Like every game, and we saw it with Cormac Ryan in their previous game, someone can get hot and hit a fantasy score that is tournament viable, but what is the likelihood of it? And how likely are you to project it or predict it? In this case, I think it's very low. So Notre Dame is a team where I'm just going to take bets on players that have more consistent roles in better game environments.
On the other side, I foolishly thought that Montana State could cause them some problems. We never got to see it because Texas Tech, kind of like Houston, if they start shooting, you could forget it. They're going to win the whole thing. And Shannon was showing no mercy. He was 3 for 4 from 3. He was dominant. They won going away. They nearly hung 100 points. So what do we take from that? All their players are pretty reasonably priced, starting with Arms and Williams O'Banner, the Oral Roberts transfer. How do you go about attacking Texas Tech?
Texas Tech, they're healthy now, which is great. They're a team that also dealt with injuries throughout the year. It seemed like at one point or another, Kevin McCullough or Terrence Shannon was out for this team, and they very seldom had both of them healthy together. Now they're both healthy. They should be playing full minutes. I wouldn't look at the last game. That's just not representative of how they actually play. You had McCullough at 18, Shannon at 26. They're both going to be around 30, probably more if they're both healthy. McCullough had played 30 minutes plus in the 2 previous games. He's the player I like the most, 15.5% usage rate, which you could argue would be a little higher if it weren't for the injuries. He'll be active in the periphery, good assist rate, good rebound rate, in addition to his decent shot rate. So it's probably Kevin McCullough, but overall, this isn't the best game environment for DFS. So Arms and Shannon could probably be used in tournaments, but I think you're making some concessions if you play either of them.
Just looking at Texas Tech from what I can see, and obviously, again, you have the tools and the data, it seems like this is not a team that's logging guys for, 38 minutes, 40 minutes. It looks like they've got a lot of guys, even their good players, 25, 30 minutes. And if they get pushed, maybe a little more. Obviously, the last game, they geared down. But is that what you see as well in terms of their rotation?
For the most part, yeah. I think unless it's a hyper-competitive game, on rare occasion, we've seen a guy like McCullough get to 35. And I think he would need a hyper-competitive game to coax that out. And it's a 7.5-point spread. So I'm not sure Notre Dame can just give them that game environment.
You mentioned you lean Texas Tech, but you're not looking to lay 8. What are you doing with the game on the betting front?
It's another spot where, similar to some of the other games we've talked about, where I want to bet Texas Tech, but it's a big number to lay. Like if you look at Ken Pom, my model on the back end has Texas Tech -7. So potentially a little value to Notre Dame, but it's such a bad matchup for them that I don't think I'll end up betting it. The one thing I do have in the game is the under. Both these teams play really slow. Texas Tech matches up extremely well defensively against Notre Dame. I think the entire bet hinges on if Notre Dame can get a couple stops, because their defense, let's just say they're not known for it.
Yeah, and obviously they're not going to be shooting like they were against Alabama, which is, you couldn't have a more different game environment from what Notre Dame saw at the opening round against Alabama. So I'm with you. I think Texas Tech gets it done. I'm not going to lay 8 points, so may not find the card for me. Williams, point rebounds, assists, 18.5 on PrizePicks seems low.
Let me look. With Williams, I think he's going to be playing a little bit less now that they have healthy McCullough and Shannon. So my first instinct is to avoid his props.
Fair enough. I mean, everyone had a huge game against Montana State. It's hard to glean much from that. He doesn't really do much with the assists, but yeah, you get add in a couple of rebounds, like 15 real life points. That'll get you there. So only play McCullough in this game in big field GPPs. I mean, it's not a great game environment. I think that's where I think you're leaning as well. It's just not a great game. What is there to say, right?
McCullough's viable on FanDuel and cash. He's below 5K, but on DraftKings, probably not. Yeah, he's egregiously priced on FanDuel.
So there you go. Yeah, I think, Kevin, you're right on it with that logic. Good stuff there. All right. Auburn, Miami, Hurricanes survived. Kind of a wacky game against USC. USC played really poorly. They still almost won. Miami made a couple foul shots late, but now they've got to take on Auburn, who's got, title implications. They got bigger things to do. Jabari Smith actually caught a body in the first game. That was maybe one of the best dunks I've ever seen. Walker Kessler, they've just got so many guys. But let's start with their big two, Kessler and Smith. Can you play them together? Do you have a preference? How do you go about this situation?
You can play them together. Just going to be very, very difficult because the team total 75. It's not like you have a 90-point team total like we saw Arizona in their first game. So it's like they're both going to have to hit ceilings. And that means Walker, if you're playing with him, Jabari needs to score, and Walker's going to need to fill it up with rebounds and blocks and the peripheral stuff, which he definitely can do. Between the two of them, I have a slight preference towards Walker because he does have that peripheral upside. He almost had a double-double with blocks in their first game, and we've actually seen him do that this year. Walker's playing through a shoulder injury, so there's always the chance that, if this game gets out of hand, they take him off the floor because they have more important games in the future. But if it's competitive, Walker's going to play a lot of minutes, and he played 31 in their previous game, and that game wasn't necessarily the most competitive. Jabari's a little more shot dependent. Fortunately, he's a 21% shot rate. He's also a great rebounder, more assists upside with him than Walker as well. So I think you can play both. I probably wouldn't do it in cash game environments. That's going to be more of a tournament play. And if you do that, I think you need somebody on Miami to keep it close. Otherwise, you might see Auburn take their foot off the gas. But overall, individually, they're both amazing plays too. Deciding between them is difficult. I slightly lean Walker for the peripheral upside, but you can't go wrong playing Jabari either. For the cheaper guys, I probably just would play KD Johnson. He's run bad lately in shots. I mean, in the
A&M game.
Yeah, he was 0 for 14, if I'm not mistaken, but he still has a 19% shot rate, decent assist rate. KD's the cheaper guy I would play here.
Anything on like a Zed Jasper, someone like that, sub 4K, or is it just too thin, doesn't do anything?
Zep has an All-American name. Unfortunately, he's not an All-American player. I would probably avoid.
It's pretty good name, though. Jalen Williams sporting the Q tag. It looks like he's going to play. He's the guy that lost the tooth.
He practiced yesterday.
Yeah. Does that matter to you?
No, he doesn't do anything. If he's out, it would help Walker probably. They just don't have any bodies, but he doesn't play in competitive environments anyway.
Yeah, you mentioned Walker Kessler. He in the last game, he nearly did have a triple-double with blocks. It's absurd. 9 blocks. Jabari can shoot threes. He had 14 rebounds. These guys are absolutely fantastic. If you do go to them, what are you doing with McGusty and the Canes on the other side? Is it a run back situation? Do you want to target these guys? How do you break down what they're going to be doing in a tough spot?
For cash games, I'm comfortable playing just either Walker or Jabari. For game stacks, if you're playing like Walker and KD, Walker and Jabari, some combination of those big three for Auburn, I do think you want to run back. If this accesses the total, which is 143 right now, I bet the over. There's a couple reasons why, which maybe we can get into in a little bit here. Miami needs to keep it competitive, and they're going to do that through shooting. They shoot a lot of threes. They're pretty good at them. McGusty has the best rates. Again, this Miami team is at a massive size disadvantage, but they do have shooters. McGusty has the 27.5% shot rate. All of the shooters in this team are kind of in the mid 6Ks to upper 6Ks. If you're not playing McGusty, I think you probably just go all the way down to Wong, who's 63. Certainly not Wardenberg. He's going to be banging with Kessler. It's a tough match for him. But, out of the big four, their shot rates are all so consistent across the board. I think you could play any of them. My preferences are all the way up to McGusty to take the biggest shot rate or just pay down for Wong. And that's a game stack type situation for me, not cash.
Is there something specifically about Charlie Moore that you're not drawn to, or is it just you lean to these other guys?
He's just smashed in between in price. When you look at McGusty versus Moore, McGusty has a much better rebound rate. With Moore, you're going to have the assists there, but you're much less likely to notch like a double-double. With McGusty, you at least have that ability. I don't think he does it, but a 20% rebound rate versus a 10% rebound rate for Moore. People rarely double-double in college with assists, so that's just not really live for Moore. For Wong, you have better rates across the board. Like Wong can rebound and assist, so that's why Moore is a little bit below for me compared to Moore, McGusty, and Wong. Jordan Miller.
On the PrizePicks side, you've got Jabari Smith, 28.5 points, rebounds, assists. Obviously, you mentioned this is a guy that he can contribute a number of ways. Good rebounder, obviously an alpha scorer. Are you comfortable taking a position there?
No, I actually have it like almost right on that.
Okay. There you go. No value, but that's the thing about PrizePicks that I love. You can pass. Like it's not something where you have to take that stand. You can just omit him from the card and look for better spots. Talk to me about, you just alluded that you like the over here. You think Miami clearly can do their part of their team total, or is it just Auburn hanging, 80 plus? What do you see developing?
I think it's entirely dependent on Miami hitting their threes, and Miami's a good shooting team. They're 23rd in field goal percentage this year. They are going to shoot a lot of threes. They're 80th in the country in 3-point percentage. I mean, Auburn plays good defense everywhere, so it's not going to be easy for Miami. But as long as they shoot to their season average in field goal percentage, I think they can at least play to their team total. And then I think Auburn just slaughters them. They have an amazing matchup here. I think over Auburn team totals are live here. So that's kind of why I think the over in general is playable too.
Wait, a question on FanDuel. Wendell Green in cash, ?
I wouldn't. There's just too much value other places.
Yeah, I think that's Wong and McGusty are both 6.5 on FanDuel. Is McGusty still the preference? Yes, for me.
For me as well.
All right. 2 games. We can look at these subscribers rolling in right on the screen. Mr. Journey, welcome to the channel. This is if I could only see one game, even though I will admit that Houston and Illinois is probably the most competitive game, maybe the best teams. If I could only see one game, it would be the next game we're talking about. It would be Texas, who Undertaker.gif from the dead. They're back. They walloped Virginia Tech, who a lot of people were high on, me included. They take on Purdue, who mercifully covered for me for a change, took down Yale in very easy fashion. Purdue's a 2.5-point favorite, 134.5 point total. I bet Purdue. I like Purdue, but they're going to have their hands full. Texas can play. So you mentioned Timmy Allen. What do you make of this team? What did you see against Virginia Tech? Because last time I had seen them against TCU, they were imploding and Chris Beard looked lost out there.
Yeah, you could very well see that again today. Texas is one of the most disappointing teams of the year. Very high expectations considering the high-profile transfers they brought in, but just haven't been able to put it together. Really weird matchup overall. Purdue is amazing on offense. They're 3rd. Texas is 12th on defense. Conversely, Texas poor on offense. They're 100th, but Purdue's poor on defense. You kind of have strength on strength, weakness on weakness. How does this play out? We're on opposite sides of this game, and it's not because I think Texas is a great team. I just took the number immediately when it was 3.5, just based on the math. So I would not bet Texas at this point. The only reason I took it is I knew I was getting the best number that was going to be available. So and you're on Purdue, right?
I am. So can land on 3. And then we're all happy because I have them at 2.5.
That would be brilliant.
That would be lovely. This is, of course, a macro buy for me. We're going to see, because unlike Yale, Texas has guys that can deal with what Purdue can do. And certainly the matchup in that backcourt, I want to see Ivy. I want to see these guys take him on. But from the DFS standpoint, you've talked all year about Edey and Travion and whatnot. What do you see here for how this could develop?
Not quite the matchup they had against Yale, but they have drastic size advantages here. Texas doesn't play with a big usually. They will probably be forced into playing some of the big dummies they have, like Brock Cunningham will probably end up playing more minutes just because nobody can stand in there with Edey. But overall, they have size advantages. The problem is with Edey and Trevion, they're going to split minutes right down the middle, no matter what. If one of them gets in foul trouble, the other one comes in. They do not play together. I mean, they have block upside, so the ceiling is there. It's really hard for me to play Edey over like Mathurin or some of the other guys in the 7K range. Same thing with Trevion in his price range. Ivy's the guy that plays the more consistent minutes, has the higher shot rate. and really the more consistent usage across the board. It's just the team total here is pretty low, 69 points for Purdue, even as the favorite. Game total's 139 overall. And Texas plays good defense. That's the one thing they do very well. So it's tough for Ivy here. He also doesn't really access the better matchup that Edey and Trevion do.
I assume you're not looking at like Stefanovic or Hunter or those guys.
Stefanovic is 3,700 on FanDuel. The problem is there's so many other players that are cheap. You don't need to get to him. Hunter is 4,800. I mean, they slaughtered Yale, so his minutes came down a lot. With Hunter, I would rather play Curbelo straight up, but if you're looking for a 1-for-1 pivot in tournaments in the value range, Hunter, I mean, the assist rate's somewhat there. I mean, he just is so unutilized on the court. It's tough to get to him.
Yeah, and we had questions on some of those values. Curbelo for Illinois is definitely a guy you can look to there. On the Texas side, before we move on, there's just a lot of guys in that no man's land. Bishop, Ramey, Carr, Jones, these types. Is it just not the spot for them, or are you comfortable if you do land on some of them?
Purdue's not good on defense. So
no, they're not.
People are scared, I think, by the size and Purdue's preseason rankings. They were number 1 in the country for a while, but they've been exploited down the stretch. I don't hate getting Timmy Allen. He plays every single minute. His usage rate has sharply increased. He's above 20% shot rate, rebound rate, and assist rate last 3. So he's literally doing it all. Timmy Allen projects very well too. It's just kind of the sticker shock with Timmy Allen seeing him at this price. But he's so active, you can play him, in my opinion. Marcus Carr and Courtney Ramey are values. They both have been over 30 minutes in 2 of their last 3 games. Ramey's on the cheaper side. With Ramey, he doesn't project as well, but he is a guy who's played a lot better recently, above 20% shot rate and rebound rate last 3. So when you play Ramey, you're betting on the usage continuing and him not regressing back to the usage we saw early in the year. Marcus Carr he's extremely volatile. He has a 17% shot rate, 34% assist rate, which is great. But I mean, he's wildly underachieved this year compared to what we expected transferring over. He's cheap enough, but I mean, he's right in the McCullough range. So I don't think he's a priority, but it's certainly tournament viable.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I can't wait to see this game. I don't think it's the best DFS environment, but we'll see. If Purdue's as good as I've said they are all year, they will get by them, and then they will have their hands full against the vaunted St. Peter's Peacocks next week. And I hope we get to see that. It would be very, very interesting. If you could, and we've talked around this, but let's just get it right out there. If you could only play Kessler or Paulo, if you could only have one, who would it be?
Kessler.
Like Arizona plus 110 to miss Elite Eight. I do not, because I think TCU is drawing stone dead today to beat them. And I would rather just back the winner of Houston, Illinois against Arizona. And it leads us to our last game, TCU versus Arizona. Biggest spread of the day. Wildcats 9.5 point favorite, 144.5 point total. I will say TCU, it's not like they haven't handled good teams at times. Beat Kansas, has given some teams trouble. I think it's a little misleading if you just look at the box score of the Seton Hall game. Seton Hall just couldn't buy a bucket. TCU didn't dismantle them. Seton Hall just missed all their shots, but they do have some players. Obviously, I really like Miles. He had a fantastic start to this tournament, but what do you see here against a much better opponent?
Yeah, you look at shot quality, they should not have won that game. There was another game where we had Seton Hall actually winning. They just shot so poorly that didn't end up mattering, but they now have a pace up spot here. So I think just from a raw team total perspective, game environment perspective, this is a pretty good game overall. And I think that stems to TCU mainly because of price. They're priced down. Mike Miles is a 20% usage rate this year. He has a 28% shot rate, 12.5% rebound rate, and 22% assist rate last 3, and he's at 6.4K. Arizona paces teams up. The total in the game is above 143, and Arizona has been susceptible on defense of late. We just saw them give up a ton of points to Wright State, a game that was way more competitive than it should have been. And even if you look at the shot quality data, Arizona was the team that overachieved in that game, and Wright State underachieved. Wright State should have scored more points than they did. So TCU, I don't think hangs in the game with Arizona, but I think the game environment fast enough, competitive enough to play a guy like Mike Miles, but he's the only guy I want to play for TCU. He's just way too cheap.
On the Arizona side, what is the status of Rasa? Do you care if he plays? Is it just Kier dependent? How do you go about breaking down a team where their point guard is still an unknown?
I think Rasa might play. He warmed up for their last game, didn't end up playing. I think the expectation was that they would handle Wright State, and Wright State gave him a little more of a game than they expected. TCU is definitely better than Wright State, so I think you might see Rasa. If you don't, Kyer is going to play close to 30 minutes. Kyer he's not as good as Rasa. He's not as active in the periphery. He doesn't shoot. So he's coming up in price too. He's 5,300, which is much different than the Cryer we had at 4.4K. Pele is still playing 20 minutes, no matter if Kreese is playing or not. So he's appropriately priced, I think, for this game environment. You can play math anytime you get him on the slate. He underachieved last game. His price didn't come up. So I love Mathurin. He accesses a fantastic team total. He's active in every peripheral category. Mathurin's a great play here on both platforms. FanDuel, he's 6,600. Like, my goodness, that doesn't make any sense. Colico had the best game of these guys, but that was on the back of Ozelis Tubelis getting in foul trouble immediately in their last game. He only ended up playing 20 minutes. Finished with 3 fouls, just like showing teams like benching players with 2 fouls in the first half is moronic, but they continue to do it. So Tubelis is a bounce back candidate. He'd played 30 minutes plus in previous games, so I'm not worried about his role. I think it was literally just the fouls. For tournaments, love Tubelis. Dalen Terry is a little expensive for my liking.
Are you comfortable with a couple of these guys, a Mathune and a Coloco together, a 2 of 3 of the big guys in Arizona? Are you looking to mix and match? Because this game, obviously, total wise is pretty healthy, and Arizona's got a big implied total.
Yeah, they're cheaper than, Duke and some of the other teams that have the studs. Auburn, I think you can play 2. I think less people are going to because of the foul trouble that Tubelis. Mathurin busted for us on his most recent game. It was just Colico that played well. So you can definitely play multiple Arizona pieces. I think it's going to be more contrarian. For cash games, I'm focusing on 1.
Final thoughts. We've done 8 games up, 8 games now. If you've got final questions, we've got a couple minutes if you want to throw them in chat. But when you look at each slate is unique. What do you see today that maybe is different? Is it more balanced build, softer pricing, starved for value, no Frankie Collins, no Creighton players? Is that the theme? What do you see here?
Yeah, it's definitely it. There's players that are mispriced, but they're not the stone min. You have Kyle Young, you have Curbelo, Hawkins, I think is another one you could mention. Ramey's probably a little too cheap. I think you got to play multiple guys in that range in order to access the elite monsters at the top. Kessler, Banchero, all those guys you want to get to. So for me, that's the approach I'm taking. Generally speaking, in college basketball DFS, for the roles that Banchero, Liddell, the studs have, they're always going to be too cheap. So the stars and scrubs approach has always been viable. Today, unfortunately, we just don't have the same value. So for me, I ended up getting multiple guys in that price range, whether it was Roach, Curbelo, Hawkins. Those are the guys I'm focusing on to access the ceilings of the elite studs.
All right, couple rapid fire. Favorite 2 FanDuel 8K guys. So there are a couple guys up there that you like.
Yes, but choosing between them is hard. I think Jabari or Walker or Paulo.
Yeah, the big names. All right. Favorite cheap forward for DK cash.
Kyle Young.
Juwan Roberts for value? ?
No.
Yeah, I don't see that either. He is sub 4K, but I still don't see it. Terry on FanDuel, is he a little more, price? You mentioned some of the pricing over there is softer. Does that put him more playable or still no?
I mean, probably. I didn't look at him because there's so much value, but if I'm just like, he doesn't even pop up near the top of the best values, and it's because so many people are underpriced, but I imagine he's the same.
Final one, Kyler Edwards on PrizePicks, 14.5 points. I know it could be a low methodical game, but can he still get there with the way he can shoot at times?
He's a shot rate above 20%. I'm going to cross-reference this with the projections right now, see what we get on Kyler. What was the prop?
14.5 points.
Got him at 16.
Yeah. On that, we'll get one more. Edwards or Mathune last in, it would be Mathurin for me.
Mathurin for me.
All right. On that note, we're going to bounce on out of here. Yeah, we only need 9 more likes to 100. We appreciate that. I know we're going to get it on the way out. Good luck, guys. Obviously, the tournament will roll on, and you will be seeing me and Matt throughout the week, both here and on the Odd Shopper YouTube. For Mike behind the glass, for me, for Matt, if you have any questions, hit us up on Twitter, hit us up on Discord. Enjoy the games today. Thanks to PrizePicks for sponsoring. Have a great one, and we will talk to you guys during the Sweet 16.